Everybody, it's Laura from the CCSA. Just wanted to let you know we will get started in about 7 minutes. If you have not dialed in, please dial into the audio portion, or if you can hear it on your computer, you are good to go. Everybody is on mute except for myself and Mike from Skutt. And if you will save all your questions to the end, we'd appreciate it. And there is also a chat section, and you can type your questions in there, and Mike will get to them either during his presentation or at the end. Hey everyone, it's Laura from the CTSA. Mike and I are on hold here. We've got about 5 minutes left and we'll get started on our webinar. Everybody is on mute except for Mike and myself, and that's to help with background noises. So if you will hold your questions to the end, we'd appreciate that. And there's also a chat section at the bottom of your screen. You'll be able to see that, and you can ask a question there if you don't want to forget it. And we'll get started in just a few minutes. Hey everyone, it's Laura from the CTSA. Hope you are having a great Tuesday. Wanted to let you know that everybody is on mute in the audio. At the end, we will open up for questions. If you will type your questions into the chat session, we would appreciate that. And Mike will be joining us in just a moment. We'll get started in about 2 minutes. everyone, it's Laura from the CCSA. I've got Mike Stevers here with me. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. Everybody has been muted, just to let you know. If you will type your questions into the chat message area, we will answer your questions at the end. And we have muted everybody because we can. No, I'm kidding. We've muted everybody, so there's just a lot of background noises when we do these things. So Mike will take over in just a few minutes, and we'll get started in about a minute. All right. Hi, everybody. It's Laura from the CCSA. I'd like to welcome you all to our webinar. Today we have Mike from Skutt with us, Mike Stevers from Skutt, and we're so grateful that he came to join us. We know you have a lot of questions about kilns, and I'm sure Mike is going to enlighten us with a lot of information. Just to let you know, everybody is muted. Please type your questions over in the chat session, and we will get to those as we can, or rather Mike can, because I can't tell you anything about kilns, so except for what they look like. So Mike is going to help us do all of that, and thank you so much for joining us. And Mike, I'm going to let you go ahead and take it away.
Great. Thanks, Laura. I am Mike. I've been with Skutt for over 20 years now. I do all the advertising, manuals, catalogs, trade shows, you name it. You're probably used to seeing Jim Skutt, our president at CCSA. I pop my head into there every once in a while. But this presentation normally takes me about an hour and a half, and we've got a half an hour, so I'm just going to jump right into it. We're going to talk about how to set up your kiln room so it's safe and efficient, no one's getting burned, and carts are rolling around nice. How to load your kiln, to be more efficient, to solve problems in firing. We're going to talk about programming, but we're not going to get into the details of programming. I'll show you where we have some great resources at the end of this on our website. We've done videos on just about anything you'd want to do programming-wise, so I'll show you where that stuff is. How to manage maintenance and repairs. Also, we're not going to go into the nitty-gritty of actually how to do the repairs, but again, we have videos on how to do all that stuff, so I'll show you where that is. And then I'll show you some of the new tools that we have that hopefully makes your life a little easier. And at the end, we'll definitely have time for questions. All right, so you just bought your business, or you're setting it up, you're moving into a strip mall or something. This is one of the most confusing things for most people getting started, because I had no idea what phase or the implications of amperage and voltage and stuff. when I first started with Skutt. So the main thing is when you're working with your landlord, or if you have a new building, find out what voltage and phase they have available, and find out how much amperage they have available, and then go get your kiln. I don't know how many times that we've had people call us up and say, oh, my kiln's not reaching temperature because they went and bought a kiln on Craigslist or something and it doesn't match the right power supply. So if you have any questions on that, consult your distributor, or feel free to call us anytime and we can walk you through that whole process. And I should say that everything that I'm going to talk about today is applicable across all different kiln lines. So if you have a different brand, this should be still valuable to you. All right, so you're going to need different types of receptacles in your kiln room. Obviously, you're going to need one for the kiln. It's either going to be a 3-phase or a single-phase receptacle. If you have multiple kilns, you're going to need 2 of those, and they all need to be on dedicated breakers. You're also going to need one for your vents, and we'll talk about vents in more detail, but there's basically downdraft vents, and there's ones that can mount over your kiln as well. Ours, downdraft vents that we sell, the EnviroVent 2, that's a 120-volt outlet, just like any outlet in your house. Then if you choose to add Kiln Link, which we'll talk about a little bit about, it's one of those new tools, you're also going to need 120 volt for there. So one outlet with 2 plugs is generally good enough, unless you want an additional fan. Sometimes it's hard to keep that room cool enough, especially during the summertime if you're down in Houston or Phoenix or Dallas. So sometimes you're going to need to put an extra box fan in there. So just make sure you have plenty of power to work with. And then also, if you are going to work with Kiln Link, then you're going to need an Ethernet port so you can plug into the internet. Okay, so let's start with layout. According to UL, and this is for most kilns, they need to be 18 inches from any wall. Can be, any type of wall. It doesn't have to be a cement wall. It can be just a regular drywall wall. You want to be at least 18 inches from any traffic areas, storage cabinets, and you want to be 18 inches from another kiln. And the reason for that is you don't want it radiating heat back onto the controller. So if you can, kind of angle the touch pads away from each other, and that'll help keeping some of the heat off of the adjacent kilns. I've seen people paint little yellow stripes to make sure that people aren't doing things like this, setting boxes of newspaper right up against the kiln. The outside does get very hot, and if a piece of newspaper or something was to set against that kiln, it could, ignite it. So you want to make sure you have good clearance from anything that can catch on fire, especially if you have peepholes open. Okay, next slide. Okay, floor covering. By Uniform Mechanical Code, it should be on tile or concrete or some kind of masonry. A VCT tile, I see a lot of that in school, so that seems to be okay too. You definitely do not want it on carpet or a wood flooring. If you're in an old building with a wood floor, it's not the end of the world. You can go down to Home Depot or something and get some of those 12-inch, 2-inch thick pavers, and make sure you make a platform that's at least 12 inches beyond the perimeter of the kiln, and then you would be up to code. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about vents. So I mentioned that we have the EnviroVent 2. Different brand kilns have their own brand of downdraft vents. We worked with Orton about 30 years ago to develop this. And the nice thing about these vents is it not only gets the fumes out of the room, but it actively gets them out of the kiln. And so what does that do? That, number one, gets all the fumes out of the room before they can enter the room. And they've taken most of the nasty stuff out of glazes these days and clay bodies. So really what you're dealing with mostly is carbon monoxide. And it's usually not enough to cause any serious damage, but it could give you a headache or something. So this actively gets it out of the kiln and pushes it out, vents it out just like your dryer would vent something out. It also, since you're bringing more oxygen into the firing, if you have troubles with pinholing, and I know a lot of you guys are using commercial bisque, but let's say you get some bad bisque and you don't want to have to send it back because it's you're getting a ton of pinholing, you could refire that bisque and burn out all the carbon in it, because what's happening is the carbon is not getting out when it's fired in the factory, and then it comes out and causes pinholes in your glazes when you do your glaze firing. It also improves or brightens colors because you're getting more oxygen in there. There's less to affect the formulation of the glaze, so your reds, yellows, oranges tend to be brighter. It also is creating a little turbulence in the kiln and bringing that hot air back down, so it improves the temperature uniformity in the kiln. Kilns generally fire cooler in the bottom because heat rises and there's no elements in that bottom section or in the bottom of the kiln to heat up underneath that shelf. So by bringing in a downdraft vent, you're bringing some of that heat back down. Also, some of the stuff that burns out of the glazes, all those fumes, aren't really great for anything metal in your kiln. So your elements, your thermocouple, your bands, they can definitely benefit from actively getting that stuff out of there. So usually when you order a kiln from the factory, you just say, I want it drilled for an EnviroVent. We drill the proper holes in the lid and the slab. Usually your distributor can set it up for you, and they basically just slide this collection cup underneath the kiln. You're going to need a 3-inch hole through a wall or a ceiling for the exit duct, and then you just mount the motor to the wall and plug it in, and you're ready to go. If you get the EnviroLink, which you can see to the right there, mounted below the motor, that keeps your employees from forgetting to turn on the vent. So if you have the EnviroVent or EnviroLink set up correctly, when you press start, your vent will just automatically start, and it'll turn off when you're done. I think it's under $100. Okay, so room ventilation is different than kiln ventilation. Although there are some overhead vents where you prop your lid and leave the PEEP plug out during the firing, and then you got to come back and lower your lid because the kiln won't get to temperature. So a lot of people use the downdraft and the updraft in combination, or the overhead. So the overhead is better at getting heat out of the room, but normally those decisions should be made by an HVAC guy. They're going to ask you, well, how much heat does this kiln put out? And they're going to look at the insulation in the room and the height of the ceiling, and then they can calculate how much air they have to move through that room. So you would give them the BTU rating, which you can find on our website. Plan B, if you don't have AC in that room, you don't have an overhead vent, especially if you're in a cooler area, you can just kind of leave the door open, put some box fans in there. But the key is you want to keep the room below 100 degrees F. If you don't, on our kilns you get something, an error code that says EBD, and that is telling you that the controller is getting too hot, and it's going to shut the kiln down to prevent it from overfiring. So if you do get that message, you got to do something. Bring a fan in first. That's the cheapest solution, and just kind of blow it across the controller. And that usually gets you there. If you're still having problems, give us a call, and we can walk you through some other options. All right, sprinklers. We have set off a few of these. The lowest rating head, see how these sprinklers work is you usually have a head in here that's like a fuse. And I think the lowest one is like 130 degrees, which if you have your lid propped and you don't have any ventilation in there and it's right above the kiln, it can set it off. But you can go to your landlord and find out who the sprinkler contractor is, and a lot of times they can put a higher temperature head in there. I think it goes up to 300 and something degrees. So if you're a little worried about it, fire up the kiln and tape a little cheap thermometer next to it and kind of monitor it to make sure you're not getting close. I think it's a red fuse in there is the lowest one, and you can pull down off the internet what the color coding is. The higher the ceiling, obviously, the more distance you have from the kiln, the more help it is. Rack storage, basically when you're locating the kilns, make sure you're not making your employees squeeze by these things to get the stuff they need. They, like I said, they do get really hot. They will burn your skin, especially if you have a peat plug out and it's firing. It's more of a flame, so it's a little more dangerous. So make sure they have adequate room to get to what they need. It's nice to have your carts, room for your carts so you can load the kilns in there. A lot of people buy these little shelf carts so they get the shelves off the floor and can move them around if they need to. And then make sure your storage cabinets have adequate distance from the kilns. I've had some art teachers who had their crayons stored right above their kilns and they all melted. So something you want to be aware of. All right, well let's talk about kiln loading now. Kiln loading is one of the most underrated or untalked about ways of improving the performance of your kiln. And also there's certain secrets to get more efficiency out of loading your kiln. And one thing that you would behoove you to do is spend some time with the people loading your kiln and teach them how to load the shelves properly so you don't bang into the side and break the brick out. Don't lean in or rest your hand on the top brick and break the top brick out. So these things can look pretty ugly after a while if you just give employees free rein and they're not taking ownership of it. So there's certain tricks to get more in each load. A lot of times what people do when they're loading a kiln is they're afraid they're not going to get as much in the kiln that they want to get in. And so they load it really heavy in the bottom and then light in the top and the middle, or vice versa. They realize that they're not going to get enough in the kiln, and then they pack it really dense in the top. I think I got a little ahead of myself. We'll talk about that more on the next slide. But you want to make sure you have proper clearances in there. We'll talk more about that. Clean hands are important when loading things. You don't want anything affecting the glazes. And then spend a little time, might help with your insurance, to teach people proper lifting techniques. Some of our kilns are pretty tall and some of your employees are pretty short, and it can be pretty difficult to get that bottom shelf in sometime. And another thing to be really sensitive about is those lids, especially if you have an older kiln without a lid lifter. If you let the maintenance go on like your lid brace or something and they bump it with their elbow, that could be 100 pounds coming down on their head, so be careful with that. Okay, so prior to loading, check out your shelves. Make sure you don't have any bare spots on your kiln wash. If you do, either patch them up or just clean them all off and start with a fresh coat. If you're using stilts, make sure the points aren't laid down and the pieces will sit real stable on there. make sure that your element grooves are free of debris. Like if you notice that a little piece of brick or a piece of glaze or anything is sitting on that element, get it off there before you fire the kiln, because that could just burn right through the element and then you got a kiln down. Check the thermocouple, cracks and excessive wear. You can see in that top picture there, the one on the right is on its way out, but we'll tell you how to know when it's time to change your thermocouple in a little bit here. I'm going to show you some kiln logs later on. Check your kiln log. If you need to make any, you got an element that's a little dicey on the bottom and you might want to load it a little lighter than normal. If you had any error codes, or if your firing times are getting extra long, especially if you're writing your own programs. Heat work is time and temperature. So if it's taking a long time to fire, it means the kiln is struggling to reach temperature. You could overfire the pieces if you're using the ramp and hold program of your firing. Usually contemporary stews are just using that for glass. Hopefully you're using cone fire mode or whatever your brand's version of that is every time. It's the most fail-safe thing you can do. And then also sometimes some companies are starting to get into high fire clay. Make real sure that you don't have any low fire clay if you're firing high fire clay, because it will completely melt down. And I've seen plenty of ruined kilns where a whole load just got melted down. So we'll talk a little bit about how you can prevent that also. Okay, so clearances, you want at least 1 inch from the bottom, so you're posting up with a 1-inch post from the bottom. That's because you want heat flowing under the slab or under the bottom shelf. You want to keep wear at least 1 inch from the elements, so after they load it, get them in the practice of looking down around the kiln and make sure something didn't, like a little bowl, can easily be cantilevered so it's just sitting right up against an element. If you get it too close to the element, it can burn out a glaze, or worst case scenario, if it's touching the element, it will burn out the element. Keep wear at least 2 inches from the lid. As you can see in the picture here, somebody didn't do that. A lot of people think that if you look across and everything is good, you can't see it rising above the kiln, then it's good. The problem is when the lid heats up, it actually becomes a little convex because it's expanding more inside the kiln than it is outside of the kiln because of the heat, and it'll actually drop down and pick up pots sometimes. So 2 inches is a good rule. Try to stay at least 1 inch. And then allow enough room between shelves. So if you're doing a lot of tile, there's certain brands that don't have as many element grooves as us. And if you do, let's say, a 2-inch or post on a shelf, it's possible not to have an element radiating between that layer in there, and so things would likely be underfired. Okay, density of the load. This is what I was getting at earlier. So the density of the load, the more wear you have in a particular portion of the kiln, the slower it's going to fire, because it's going to take longer to absorb that heat work. So the coolest places in your kiln are the bottom of the kiln and the top of the kiln. So generally you want to load it a little lighter on the bottom, average in the middle, and then maybe a little lighter on top. And that'll give you good heat uniformity. If you have a small load, get it up near the thermocouple. If you put it all on the bottom, likely it will underfire or overfire, because the kiln's going to think, or actually underfire, I'm sorry, because the kiln will think it's done and the wear won't be ready yet. So a little trick to loading your kiln efficiently, if you look at that bottom right-hand picture, is to go ahead and cut out pieces of cardboard that match the size of your shelves and put those on your racks. And then when you have a piece of cardboard filled up, you know you have a full shelf. Another thing that you might want to do is on different shelves of the rack, put varying size kiln posts and then arrange pieces by height. And if you do that, for example, let's say you have a tall vase next to a shallow bowl. Everything above that bowl is just wasted space. So you can really pack it in tight but still get good heat uniformity if you use this method of just cutting out shelves or shapes of shelves and putting them on your drying racks. Okay. Cones. If you've ever been to any of our presentations, we're always talking about using cones. And I'm not going to go too heavy into it because we don't have a lot of time, but basically cones measure heat work and they tell you if your kiln is operating correctly. So if you call us and say, hey, you know, my ware's not coming out right, something's wrong with the kiln, the first question we're going to ask you is, what did your cone look like? And that's kind of an indication that tells us that, okay, we're getting proper heat work. It's got to be something else. We always recommend self-supporting cones. You can get them from your local distributor. If at the very least, put one about 2 inches from the thermocouple. And the thermocouple, as it wears, towards the end of its life, it will start drifting towards an overfire. And that once it starts doing that, you'll see the cone on each additional firing get lower and lower and lower. And that's a good indication that your thermocouple needs to be changed. If you see things that they look underfired or the temperature uniformity isn't quite what you'd like it to be, put some cones on different levels of the shelves, and that'll tell you how much over or under fired you may be in different areas of the kiln. If you're under fired, you might want to load it in that area a little lighter. Every kiln's a little different. They have cool spots and hot spots in different areas. And if you're doing something unique, for example, if you're trying to slow cool cone 6 glazes or do crystal glaze firing and you have to write your own programs, do a test fire first with cones and make sure that the ending temperature that you're picking is something that's going to give you the adequate heat work. When you do cone fire mode, it automatically adjusts that temperature up and down for you to get the right heat work. Okay, so programming. There's the 2 most common ways of ruining your kiln is, 1, putting in the wrong cone value. So many times, if you don't train your employees correctly, they hear, oh, I need 6. And you're firing to 06. If you have earthenware clay in there, it is all going to melt to the bottom of your kiln and probably ruin your kiln. We have a new feature that I'll talk about in a little bit that would prevent them from doing that if all you're doing is low firings. Another thing is extended hold time. So we always recommend that you put like a 5-minute hold on the end of your cone fire mode, and that's holding at peak temperature, and that allows the kiln time to, heavier loaded areas to kind of catch up with the rest of the kiln and all the glazes to flow evenly. But on your microwave, it's everything to the left of the decimal is minutes and everything to the right is seconds. So that could be the mindset of your employee. And if you put 5.00, that would be a 5-hour hold, which is definitely going to cause some problems. So build that into your training. We have a ton of videos in our resource section. I'll show you that a little bit. So I would have all your employees just watch the cone fire mode at the very minimum. When you order a new kiln, it comes with a DVD that has every video we have, or you can just log on our website at www.skutt.com, and then you can find the video that you want to learn about. Okay, so managing maintenance and repairs. So when you unload the kiln, it's nice to have a kiln firing log, and I just uploaded some of these to our website, and I'll show you how to get to them. But when they're unloading the kiln, you want to see how the cones look. Make note of that. How did the wear look on each level? There's some information that the kiln gives you at the end of the firing, and you want to write down how long did the firing take. If your firing times are increasing, keep increasing, it may be an indication that you're going to have to replace your elements soon. What number firing was this? Our newer controllers actually keep track of how many firings you have, and then that way you could say, okay, well I changed my elements on firing number 100. I know they're usually good for 300 firings, so I'm going to make a little note on firing 400 that I want to take a look at these elements and see if they're ready to replace. Or just at least when you're getting into a busy season like Mother's Day or Christmas, you can say, holy cow, I might need to do a element replacement or a relay replacement during this period. I'm going to go ahead and take care of that beforehand. And then you should also have a maintenance catalog, or not a catalog, but a log. So this lets you know how long you went between vacuuming out your elements. I'll tell you the importance of that. Tightening your bands, inspecting the screws like the one that holds that lid brace, holding the lid above your employees' heads. So I would suggest you download those two, and I'll show you where to get those. One of the best things you can do is find a good repair person. There's a few not so good repair people out there. I mean, I've seen kilns where they've gone in and got parts from Home Depot that were the wrong gauge and weren't high temperature wire. And not only are you going to have to pay for that repair twice, but you're also it also can be a fire hazard if they don't know what they're doing. So I would talk to your local distributor. They probably know who the good ones and the bad ones are. Sometimes paying a little more is worth it. And make sure the ones that you pick are using only OEM parts. There's a lot of like aftermarket elements where they can save a little bit of money on the internet, and they might not necessarily be balanced correctly. We balance our elements. We put hotter ones on the top and the bottom and cooler ones in the center. So make sure they come in Skutt packages. Like I said, you want to schedule these repairs before your busy season. And then try to do all the repairs at once, so you're not constantly paying for additional service charges and having a guy come in and bringing a kiln down for a whole day or a whole week sometimes while they wait for parts. And that might be one reason you might want to stock parts. If you have your replacement set of elements, that's something that they're not going to have to order and wait 2 weeks to get. I mean, we ship the next day, but sometimes there's delays and stuff. Relays. These relays are what control the power to your elements. They cycle it on and off to get the right rate. And then the thermocouple should, I'd keep a couple of those on hand. They're not very expensive. Ours are, I think, like $15 to replace. Okay, I'm running out of time here. I'll try to get through this real quick. Something that you should absolutely learn how to do yourself. You could save a lot of money, a lot of downtime. Replace thermocouples. It takes like 5 minutes, and it is so easy to do. And we have a video that shows you how to do that, and I'll show you where that is. Vacuum out your kilns on a regular basis. Vacuum out your kilns will extend your element life tremendously. And make sure you keep your bands tight. They loosen up over time as the kiln expands and contracts. Again, we have videos on all this stuff. Things that would be helpful to know is how to replace a relay. When you have a relay down, you have a kiln down. And if you know how to replace a relay, or you have someone trained in your business that does, then you can save a lot of downtime and a lot of money. And replacing elements, that usually takes a long time. It's not something people normally want to do, but if you're really handy and thrifty, replacing your elements can also save you a lot of money. Parts you want to stock: elements, relays, and thermocouples. All right, here's top 10 things that will make your kilns last longer. Train your employees so they're not beating up your kilns. Vacuum out your kilns, especially your element grooves, to get all that dust and little bits that can collect on top of it, because it makes them fire hotter, and you can say you double the life of your elements if you do this on a regular basis, maybe every 30 days. Tighten your bands, keep your elements in their grooves. If you look at that picture on the top left, if you bust out a bit of brick, that element turns into the consistency of like spaghetti, especially if you're high firing, and it's going to want to droop out of there. If you do bust a brick out, you can build a little fence using element pins, not paper clips. It's got to be the same metal as the element, otherwise it'll just burn out the element. So you build a little fence, and then when it's time to kind of replace elements, then you might want to replace that brick at the same time. Use only qualified kiln repair people. Now, a lot of people are getting into stoneware. One thing you need to know going into it is you might want to raise your prices a little bit, because, for example, if you were firing to cone 6, cone 10, you might get 60 to 100 firings on a set of elements. If you're strictly low fire, 300 to 500 firings on an element, or on your set of elements. So you may have more expense if you go into high fire. Keep the room below 100 degrees. Heat is one of the worst enemy for our controllers and our relays. So your relays will burn out faster if your kiln room's constantly above 100 degrees. Fire only dry ware. If you looked at the top right-hand corner, if you hold a piece up to your, and this isn't really, if you're not firing greenware, then it's not as big of an issue. But if you hold a piece of greenware up to your cheek and it still feels cool, it means it still has moisture in it. Moisture really goes after all the metal in our kiln. Use a downdraft vent. We talked about that. And then if you put in a new set of elements, do an empty firing, because all of the stuff that comes out of the glazes on your first firing will damage the initial coating that you get on your elements. And that's an oxidation coating, and that's going to protect your elements throughout the life of the kiln. So if you don't get a good one because it got interrupted by some gases coming off of your glazes, then they're just not going to last as long. Finally, some new products that we have, tools for you to use. KilnLink, I don't have a whole lot of time to give it the justice that it deserves, but it logs all your firings. It's kind of like automatically doing a log for you, so you don't have to keep a firing log. Let me go up one. It graphs all your firings. You can see what temperature each kiln you're firing is at any point in time from your smartphone or your laptop. It'll give you alerts when the kiln's ready to unload, so you're efficient, at telling people to unload that kiln, reload it. It's got a lot of benefits. Anybody wants to talk about that, feel free to give us a call or go to our website or talk to your local distributor. New features, max temp. That's the one that I was telling you about that can prevent people from putting cone 6 instead of 06. If you have a green controller, then you have this feature where you can go in and set the max temperature that anybody will be allowed to program. And if they try to program a cone 6 when they want an 06, it just won't let them. I also told you about the number of firings. It tracks that. It'll also track the cost of your firings, and that's real important to know what your costs are when you're figuring out your pricing. So when you go to set up your kiln, you'll actually input in one of the menu features what you pay per kilowatt hour. It knows how much power the kiln is using because we put current sensors on all our kilns. I think we're the only one, us and Amoco are the only ones who do that. So at the end of the firing, it will tell you how much the kiln firing costs. And then diagnostics, if you call us, we can actually diagnose your kiln just by having you press a few buttons, or your kiln repair guy can, and not charge you for a service call. He can have the parts when he comes out to get there, not charge you 2 service calls. All right, I know I went over. I apologize for that, but Laura, if these people have any questions, I don't know are you going to unmute them, or do I just read them?
Well, we do have one question. We only have a couple questions. What is the average life of a thermocouple? Okay,
well the thermocouple, it depends on the temperature you're firing. In most contemporary studio settings, if you have a downdraft vent and everything, usually 80 to 100, 120 sometimes, in that range. But there's a lot of things that range on the life of the thermocouple. You'll know that it's starting to go, like I said, by when you put a self-supporting pyrometric cone on the shelf next to it, and it starts looking like the kiln is overfiring.
All right. And if you guys have questions, please type them in. The next one is, at what temp do you recommend opening the kiln?
Well, we're extremely conservative. So, we say in our manual, I think we say 125 degrees. It all depends on the fragility of the glaze and the clay bodies you're working with. If you're working with glass, you really want to be careful if it's a real thick piece. If you open that lid and you hear snap, crackle, pop, that's your glazes fracturing. So it's no longer a food safe piece. It really depends on the glaze, but I wouldn't go much above 150 if you want to be real conservative. I've seen potters put on gloves and take it out at 350 and they're just fine. But it really depends on the glazes you're using and the bisque that you're firing. So I would ask the manufacturers of your glazes what they recommend.
And John Webb asked a question, and we're going to be able to get the whole hour and a half slideshow. The slideshow is already uploaded onto our website. We will also upload the recording. It takes about a half a day for it to process. So everything will be uploaded on the CTSA website. It's under the Events/Convention tab, and it is down on the webinars. You can also see webinars from the last 2 years, any that we have been able to record. Sometimes technology does not work in our favor. Do we have any other questions? Anyone?
Okay, one thing I did want to point out, all of this stuff that I've talked about, the videos, any printed material like the downloadable logs, you can find those. Just go to our site, skutt.com, click on the resources section, and just click on either videos or printed material, depending on what you want.
All right. And if you didn't get your questions answered here, you can always call Skutt, and I'm sure they'll be willing to help you. I know on your website there's a ton of information, and if that doesn't work, you can come to convention and ask them in person, right?
Right.
Okay, John has another question. Can a single environment be used for a multi-kiln setup?
Yeah, I forgot to mention that. The picture I showed in the presentation showed 2 kilns being vented with 1 motor. The only thing you have to do is purchase a dual vent kit, and basically it just contains an additional collection cup and a splitter for the ducting, and then another 8-foot section of ducting, and you're ready to go. As long as your kilns are under 12 cubic feet, which our 1227s, which is the most popular one out there, I think they're only 9.9. So Should work fine.
All right. Anything else before we get off here? You're welcome, John. All right, guys. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Mike, for joining us, and really appreciate it. So much information. So the webinar will be recorded. It'll be on our website later this afternoon, and the SlideShare presentation, I actually got to jump on it and put that on there earlier this morning. So thank you all for joining us. Hope you have a great day, and thanks again, Mike. Oh, and don't forget to take the survey at the end of this. We appreciate it. Thanks. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Please stand by.